Welcome back, everybody, to the David Pakman Show. Luke Beasley here, filling in for David while he is away. We have a fantastic show ahead of us, so let's dive into it. Republican presidential candidate and Senator Tim Scott did a town hall on Fox News with Sean Hannity, and wasn't super interesting, but the one moment I do want to look at that is interesting to me is in line with what we've seen from both Tim Scott and some of these other Republican candidates in this current 2024 primary field, where they're polling really low, but they refuse to criticize the guy who is polling the highest, being Trump. Tim Scott is petrified, and so many of these other individuals, whether it be Vivek Ramaswamy or Nikki Haley, they're petrified of criticizing Trump, or at least distinguishing themselves from Trump. And instead, it's this weird message of, well, I just want to distinguish myself from Biden. But you can't do that. You can do that, but you can't do that alone until you get to the general. Otherwise, you won't get there if you don't win this primary. Of course, that's how these election processes work. But Tim Scott is still very afraid, and you'll notice that in this clip, of criticizing Trump or DeSantis. And he says a little thing on Ukraine, which, okay, good. He's trying to distinguish himself there. But then outside of that, he says, but I really want to show you the difference between me and President Biden.
Yes, my name's Erin, and good evening, Senator and Sean. My question is this. In a world that we know is kind of in a downfall, and we can all agree to that, what are your main differences with the other candidates, such as Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis? What are your main policy candidates or differences?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is that I do care who wins the Ukrainian conflict. I believe Ukrainians are willing to put their lives on the line, and I hope Zelensky pulls it out. This summer offensive will be really important in that engagement. But more importantly, what I would say the biggest difference is between me and Joe Biden. That's where I'm focusing my attention. He's our problem.
So I agree with him on Ukraine, in that I disagree with a lot of the Republicans on their odd and incorrect stance on Ukraine, where they pretend like supporting Ukraine is somehow being a warmonger or something like that. We've seen that from MAGA recently. But outside of that, he just says the biggest difference is between me and Joe Biden. Yeah, every Republican is going to say they're different than Joe Biden. That's not going to win a primary for you. And so then I want to get to a bit of analysis on CNN from Sarah Longwell, who does a lot of focus groups with MAGA voters, and she kind of broke down what's going on here, where the primary is becoming, while it's getting more and more full, it's still becoming this this movie where Trump's the main character and everyone else, they're just supporting actors and actresses. And so because of that, unless something changes radically, Trump's definitely going to be the nominee. And so then the question has to be, what the heck are all these candidates doing then? And she believes at least a number of them are trying to become Trump's VP choice. Take a look.
I think this is actually the key question: is there anybody with the necessary political talent to take on Donald Trump? And I think for a lot of voters, they thought Ron DeSantis was going to be that guy. When I was doing focus groups several months ago, after DeSantis had his big win and Donald Trump had sort of suffered a string of losses for the people that he had endorsed, I was seeing a lot of activity in the focus groups where people were really interested in moving on, and they all really liked Ron DeSantis. The problem is that the more that they've seen of DeSantis, the more they say things like, I don't think it's his time yet, or he'd make a good vice president for Trump. And because Trump, whether it's the indictments or because he's able to play grievance politics, he's able to sort of suck up all the oxygen. And because these other candidates have decided to defend him in the face of these indictments, they've all become these bit players in the central drama controlled by Donald Trump. And so I just haven't seen sort of the political talent or the political will to seize these moments and elevate themselves. They're all deciding to just play second fiddle. And I think there's a lot of people in this race that are playing for VP already.
I guess that would make sense. I really wish. Oh, sorry, guys. I really wish that if you were getting into a race, a presidential race, it was because you actually thought that you had a shot of winning and you actually thought that you should be president of the United States, not this weird just raising your profile thing or trying to become a VP choice. Obviously, that's often the game that's played, and so we just deal with it. But I do wish it was always an authentic attempt to become president, because then the analysis of these types of races is a little bit strange, right? Okay, Tim Scott, does he really think he could win, or is he just trying to become the VP choice? But that doesn't seem likely at all, because Trump, at least behind the scenes, based on reporting, has indicated he wants to choose a female running mate. And so that makes sense for someone like Nikki Haley. But then in a primary, Trump can't help himself to speak very poorly of all these other individuals, Nikki Haley being one of them. He's kind of criticized, so that would make it less likely he chooses her as his VP running mate. Who knows what's going to end up happening, but definitely an odd environment developing in the primary field, at least on the GOP side. And as Sarah Longwell mentioned, because of Trump's legal troubles, even though that's hurting him generally with Americans, that's my belief, and polling seems to indicate that, in the primary field, it's creating a situation where all these Republicans, because they have to go along with a two-tier justice system talking point that hurts Republicans, helps Democrats, and they can't make the base mad, they have to go along with the idea that Trump's this huge victim. But if you go along with that, then the narrative becomes Trump is this brave warrior who's fending off the terrible deep state trying to take him down. So then all these candidates who are supposed to be saying they're the good choice are serving a role in propping up Trump as this hero, and that is the exact opposite thing you'd want to do if you were trying to defeat Trump, of course, and it's not aligned with the facts, of course. So not a good strategy in my mind, but that's what's happening on the Tim Scott campaign front.